What is your opinion about condiments?
Condiments.
Yeah.
Generally, I'm okay with them, except they add a lot of calories to your food.
Okay. So ketchup, you're good with?
Well, yeah, I guess.
Mustard, do you like
Yeah,
it?
that's okay.
Have you ever mustard?
Have I ever mustard?
Yeah.
I have no idea what you're asking.
Have you ever mustard?
No.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll find out if anyone in this book ever musters.
Muster the troops, are you saying?
Yeah. We're in 2 Samuel, the book of David. Encapsulates most of his time as king.
Yep.
Pretty much all of his time.
Yep. And you better be careful, because now I'm going to start coming up with crazy questions to ask you at the beginning of these discussions.
You'll never be as good at it as I am. I've practiced for years.
Yeah, well, I've got a few years on you. So we are talking about 2 Samuel. It took me about 2 hours to read. And it is basically the ministry, the era of David, which took about 40 years, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's what I seem to understand as well.
So it starts off, David learns of the death of Saul, and something which is going to come back later. The guy who actually put Saul to death because Saul asked him to, comes and reports it. He reports it as though it's a really good thing. And David basically says, how is it you were not afraid to stretch out your hand to destroy the Lord's Almighty, or the Lord's anointed?
Yeah.
It's a theme which is going to come up later also. David, throughout 1 Samuel, when Saul was chasing him, he had a few opportunities to bring harm to Saul, and chose not to because Saul was God's anointed.
Yeah.
So there's a consistency in David, and we see this right off in 2 Samuel.
Yeah, and there's this, there must be this inner battle. David is the Lord's anointed also. And what does it mean when there are two of the Lord's anointed to be king?
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that? And, the way David dealt with it is whenever Saul dies, then I can become king after that. And, for other times, he also, deals with it in a similar way. He doesn't want the Lord's anointed to be killed. He doesn't want bad things to happen most of the time.
Right. But once Saul dies, there begins to be immediately a fissure in Israel, and Abner, who was the commander of Saul's army, takes one of Saul's living sons, Ishbosheth, and gets him to be appointed king over Israel. David, on the other hand, is appointed king over Judah.
Right.
So we have this divide set up, which is going to last throughout 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, the divide of Israel and Judah. Although later in 2nd Samuel, David's going to unite the two. And David's going to be the king of both Israel and Judah.
Yeah. I do have a question. In chapter 1, verse 18, what does your Bible say? Because mine says, well, starting in 17, David lamented with this lamentation over Saul and Jonathan his son. And he said it should be taught to the people of Judah. Behold, it is written in the book of Jashar.
Yep. Nobody knows what the book of Jashar is.
Yeah. And mine has a footnote that says, maybe this means of the upright. I just think it's interesting the way that there's an expectation that kings will have books.
Yeah.
We've seen it before. We haven't mentioned it really, but they've talked about the book of different kings. And we did talk about it with Moses. Moses says, can you blot out my name from your book?
Yep.
So there's this an idea of books and it being full of names or poems or whatever.
Yep.
And in this case, David writes this poem, and David, not to be mean to Moses or previous poets that we've read, David's poems translate way better into English.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I don't know if that means David's a better poet, more full of the Spirit of God in some way, but it definitely, they translate a lot better into English. I guess I didn't go ahead and read through in some other languages to see like, oh, in Spanish, is this still good poetry? Is this still good poetry in Ukrainian or something?
And some of it is that the not just the flow of it, but what he says is, it's not as out there where you can't follow the thought. You can at least it seems to me you can follow the thought of David somewhat easier than some of the other poems or songs that we've read.
Yeah, I mean, when David writes, even he does mention you mountains of Gilboa, which is like, I don't know what that means, but I know what a mountain is, right?
Right.
And, mostly he mentions things that I know what they are. He mentions a couple of places, Ashkelon and the Philistines. I don't really have a great concept of, I understand what a Philistine is, but I don't have any concept of what Ashkelon is. But mostly he just talks about, like, in life and death, they were not divided. They were beloved and lovely. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. These are all concepts that are pretty universal, right? So compared to Moses' poetry, which is like talking at length about the locations and the ways that God will bless certain people. And it just isn't as easy to understand as, David, who just writes this beautiful poetry of, comparison towards animals, towards battle in general.
There's one phrase that was in the dirge for Saul and Jonathan, which it became kind of a byline for people that I was in college with. Tell it not in Gath. When something bad happens, tell it not in Gath. Don't let our enemies know. Tell it not in Gath. It's just kind of a fun thing. So maybe we got to start saying it.
Yeah.
Tell it not in Gath.
I like the way it ends. Well, it ends how the mighty have fallen and the weapons of war perished. But right before that, he talks about Jonathan, his best friend.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting the way that he describes Jonathan. David is a man who has married, at this time, multiple different people that are described as the most beautiful woman around.
Yeah.
And, I guess maybe that's a testament that, beauty is deceiving or something. But David writes, Jonathan lies slain on your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant have you been to me. Your love to me was extraordinary, surpassing the love of women. And just, I don't know, a testament to how David would have felt towards Jonathan.
Right.
A testament to the way friendships can feel. That, I think a lot of people have experienced this, where friendships outlast, any romantic relationship or...
It's one of the reasons why marrying your friend is a good idea.
Yeah.
You don't marry just for romance, but friendship it lasts.
Yeah.
So, chapter 2 is the introduction of the tension between Israel and Judah, the two different kings, and the civil war that there's going on, and they're trying to sort this out. And then you get into chapter 3, and we see that the house of David is getting stronger, and
the house of Saul is becoming weaker and weaker.
Yep, it says there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. David grew steadily stronger, but the house of Saul grew weaker continually. And we know that the house of David is going to end up victorious because the house of Saul was cursed.
Right.
So
and it's interesting. Right at the beginning of chapter 3, it lists off a bunch of sons of David. Not all of his sons, but a bunch of them. Lists off Amnon, Kileab, Absalom, people that are going to show up later. Right. Adonijah, Shephatiah, and Ithream. So these are born to David in Hebron, and I just think it's interesting the way that the story is told, the way that this is put together in a like a literary perspective of it's not a chronological list of events. It's not necessarily everything's not happening right after one another.
Yeah.
This story starts off with, here's David's sons. Now let's go back in time and we'll tell you some things that are happening.
Interesting that when you get to verse 6 of chapter 3, Abner, who has been Saul's commander of Saul's armies and was strong in the house of Saul, it says in verse 6, he asks for Saul's concubine Rizpah, and Ishbosheth says, no, you can't have that.
Yeah.
And the result of that is that Abner leaves him,
Mm-hmm.
and he goes and sides then with David.
Yeah.
It shows how quickly someone's loyalties can change.
Yeah. And that happens so much in this book where somebody's loyalty just changes almost at one sentence.
Right.
I like Abner's response to Ishbosheth. Am I a dog's head of Judah? I just think it's a funny way to respond to something.
Yeah.
Hey, can I have this? No, you can't have that. Am I a dog's head? It's just a funny way to describe yourself, or to, what am I, chopped liver? What am I, a dog's head?
There's a lot to be said here in chapter 3 just about women. David sends to Ishbosheth and says, send me my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that she was married to a different guy.
Yeah.
And David said, wait a minute, didn't I pay 100 foreskins of the Philistines for that? Actually, he paid 200.
Yeah.
But, that was just an interesting thing. And they end up sending her to David.
Yeah. And I think maybe that points to some conflict we see later, that she's now been pulled away from one husband. Maybe, it's unclear to me, at least, if David's already married to Michal, or if at this point he's saying, okay, now it's time for me to marry her. He does say, at least in this translation, give me my wife, Michal.
Right.
But I don't know, I can imagine someone saying that for give her to be my wife.
Yeah, we'd have to go back into 1 Samuel to see if he was if she was actually his wife at that point. Well, and if you feel like it, go ahead, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, but so there is, at least some level of pulling this woman away from a man that she's married to. Whether it be pulling her away from a bad relationship or a good relationship, it's still a life change, and that's hard.
Yep.
So
then I said Abner comes over to David's side, but not everybody's happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
Joab says, what do you mean you're going to let him come on our side? And Joab then goes in turn and kills Abner.
Yeah. Abner had killed Joab's brother.
Right.
And, that's the crux of the issue is Joab is, David's commander at this point. And, Joab does not want to be replaced in his job and does not want the guy who replaces him to be, a man who murders his brother. And did it in kind of a jerk way. In chapter 2, verse 23, Abner struck him in the stomach with the butt of his spear so that the spear came out his back.
Yeah.
So it's not even like I bet it sucks to die by spear, but it's not even the nice way of dying by spear where you get hit by the sharp end. You get hit by the blunt end until it cuts through you.
Right. Interesting that Joab in chapter 3:27 struck Abner in the belly so that he died on account of the blood of Asahel, his brother.
Mm-hmm.
So it's,
You've heard it said an eye for an eye, but truly I tell you, a stomach for a stomach.
Yep. And then David mourned Abner, which turns out to be gives him kudos from the people.
Mm-hmm.
They say, well, he wasn't really for killing Abner, and so it was just an interesting dynamic that he gains admiration of the people because he mourns the death of Abner. So.
Yeah, this is a place where, for me, it felt that I got to see. In 1 Samuel, we saw that David is described as a man after God's own heart.
Right.
That's how Samuel describes him. Samuel says to Saul, like, you are going to be replaced by a man who the Lord has sought out, a man after his own heart. And this is a place where I see that in David, that even though Abner was, responsible for putting in place a king instead of David, was kind of a jerk, murdering David's, at the end of 2 Samuel, there's a list of the 37 mighty men, and Asahel is one of them. Yep. So Asahel is a guy who's gone to battle with David and is counted as one of the strongest guys that David went to war with.
Yep.
And, surely David loved this man. Yep. But on the flip side, Abner comes and, he's able to in some way repent and say, like, hey, I'm sorry, what I did was wrong. I want to help you out now. And David is willing to wipe that away and say, like, okay, yeah, we'll work together. And then when Abner dies, he's sad about it. And that's just the way I view God. Yep. In a lot of ways, that God is able to see someone who turns away from him. And if we can turn back and repent and, try to work with God, right, he'll still mourn the sad things that happen to us.
So we get into chapter 4. Ishbosheth hears of Abner's death. He loses his courage, and he's disturbed. And eventually he flees, but a couple of guys chase him. And it says they came to the house of Ishbosheth in the heat of the day while he was taking his midday rest. Mm-hmm. He was taking a nap, and they came to the middle of the house as if to get wheat. They struck him in the belly, and then they cut his head off. Mm-hmm. And this is Ishbosheth now, who is now dead, and they take the head to David.
Yeah.
That's a tradition that I'm not all that keen on. There's people that I probably don't really like, but I don't want anybody to bring me their head.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's a little bit different if they're the commander of the opposing army. It's like Zelensky might be kind of happy to receive Putin's head,
right?
Because it's not just like the announcement that Putin is dead. It's not just the announcement that your opponent is dead, right, but it's the proof that the guy who's been charging people to attack you, he can't charge people that way anymore. Yep. His mouth is no longer connected to his vocal cords.
Yep. So these two guys, Rechab and Baana, bring David Ishbosheth's head, and they say, "As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from all distress." And one of them told me, "Behold, Saul is dead." David responds to them, "As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from all this distress." When one told me, "Saul is dead," and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and killed him, which was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more, when wicked men have killed a righteous man in his own house on his bed, shall I not require his blood from your hand? Ishbosheth is the opposing king.
Yeah.
And David has such a high view of Saul and his family, and God's having his hand on him, that anyone who kills Saul's family is worthy of death.
Yeah.
Interestingly, we've gotten through the first 4 chapters, and
we're 20 minutes in.
I didn't even have anything. I only had a couple of things there, so I went off my notes.
Yeah.
So we're into chapter 5, and David becomes the king over both Judah and Israel.
Right.
And then all kinds of weird things start happening.
What does your verse 4 say in chapter 5? Mine says David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years.
Yep, same thing.
Okay.
So David he spends the next few chapters basically at war.
Yeah.
And interesting, I suppose, that how he fights the war. David becomes greater and greater, for the Lord of hosts was with him, 5:10. And, he's fighting the Philistines. They move the Ark of the Covenant. That interesting story there where Uzzah was walking next to it, and it looked like it was going to fall over. He reaches out to steady it, and and he dies, because you're not supposed to touch the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
As if the Ark can't take care of itself.
Better to let it fall on the ground.
Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down.
Right.
That's going back a while. So David doesn't really want to bring the Ark into Jerusalem because, well, he's kind of afraid of it. But then he finds out that Obed-Edom, who had the Ark, he's getting blessed.
Yeah.
3 months, and it was enough to know that he's getting greatly blessed. And David says, yeah, maybe I'd like that. So let's bring it into Jerusalem.
I like this story because it is the opposite of the story that we saw before, where the Philistines take the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
And, at Eli's death. And they take it and they have it for 9 months maybe. And, they're getting all these tumors. They're having a plague of mice. And they're passing it between king to king, saying, maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe it was like we just had something weird going on here. Yeah. And everyone's getting cursed. And, now they're bringing the Ark back, back to Jerusalem, back to the people of Israel, and it's doing the opposite, right? It's blessing everyone. That it stays in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months, and there's a great blessing in their house. And, even back in Jerusalem, it is blessing them.
Yep. And of course, the journey back, it's a procession, and David's infamous dancing. Yeah. And he shows his ankles, and Nicole.
Once again, feet are shown to be extremely intimate and important.
Yeah.
And it's just a thing I don't understand at all. But, his wife is not happy. She says, you've dishonored me. You've dishonored these young women who are around you. They shouldn't be able to see this part of you.
Yeah. And yet David says, I will celebrate before the Lord. I will be more lightly esteemed than this, and will be humble in my own eyes, but with the maids of whom you have spoken, with them I will be distinguished. That is to say, he says, these maids who were there, they're going to feel good about the fact that they danced with David.
Yeah.
When
mine says, by them I shall be held in honor.
Yeah.
That he knows that they're not going to feel like it was a passing of, these boundaries, but that it was total and pure joy in the presence of the Lord.
Yeah. Chapter 7, David says, I'm going to build a temple. And God says, not so fast, dude.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like this. Because God says no, right? David says, well, I have a cool house. Why does God just have this tent? Yeah. He should have a cool house too. And, I actually, see now I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells in a tent. This is the sort of thing that I also don't really understand, but the way that they view houses and like the construction material, like for David, this is a big thing. And we'll see it again in Song of Solomon, one of my least favorite verses, as I would say, is the wife's compliments towards Solomon is, look what great house we have. The rafters are made of cedar, and our couch is green. David wants to say that to God, right?
Right.
He has this sort of marriage covenant, these promise where they're going to work together, and David wants to provide well for God, not because God can't provide for himself, but because God should have something more beautiful than what David has.
Right. And that's something which comes up again in Malachi. That tension of people living in paneled houses, and the house of God is in disrepair.
Yeah.
So in chapter 7, God says to David, you won't build a house for me, but your descendants will.
Yeah. And I think it's the best sort of no. It's God saying, of course I could take care of myself. There are so many judges. We've had 700 years since being in Egypt. I could take care of myself. If I wanted to be in a house, I could be in a house. Somebody would build me a house.
Right.
But I kind of like the tent for now. And then he, promises these good things to David and his family. And I think that's like, because you wanted great things, sure, I'll bless you.
Yeah.
You wanted great things for me, I'll bless you. That's where we have this idea of come bless the Lord. It's a similar idea of, you bless God and he'll bless you back.
Yep.
And I love David's response too. Who am I, O Lord God, and what is my house that you have brought me thus far? And yet this was a small thing in your eyes, O Lord. You have spoken also of your servant's house for a great while. And this is instruction for mankind. What more can David say to you? For you know your servant, O Lord God. That he has such a humble view of himself that, first of all, he doesn't want to be in a greater house than God. And second of all, he doesn't feel like he even deserves the blessing of God telling him no.
Right. So then David, chapter 8, he defeats the Philistines. He defeated Moab. He defeated Hadadezer. He captured all kinds of men. He defeats the Arameans. That basically chapter 8 is just David defeating all the kings around him.
And I like it. Verse 13, near the end of chapter 8, David made a name for himself when he returned from striking down 18,000 Edomites. Yeah. Like, already people have been singing songs saying, Saul struck down thousands, David struck down 10,000s.
Yeah.
People have been singing of David's great, battle deeds, and now he's made a name for himself.
Yep.
Just kind of funny to me that, the way things are laid out.
Yep. And David is, he's obviously solidifying his rule. And then chapter 9 comes in. David says, is there anyone left in the house of Saul that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? And then we're introduced to...
Mephibosheth.
Yeah. And he's brought before David, afraid that David's going to kill him.
Yeah.
And instead, David invites him to dine with him and take care. And he's going to take care of him.
Yeah. Treats him like a son is what mine says. That Mephibosheth is made like David's own son.
Yeah.
And, another testament to David's great relationship with Jonathan, but also his great respect for God's anointing of Saul.
Exactly. Chapter 10, a couple more nations are defeated. Ammon and Aram are defeated.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is like a turning point between chapter 10 and chapter 11. David has gone along. He's honored Saul's family. He's been successful. He's been built. Everything's been building up. And then chapter 11, verse 1, it happened in the spring, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David arose from his bed, walked on the roof of the king's house, and he saw a woman bathing. The woman was beautiful in appearance, and she was married.
Yeah.
And that's Bathsheba.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who has a modicum of knowledge of the Bible knows the story of David and Bathsheba, and how absolutely ugly it gets. For he lies with her, she gets pregnant, he tries to get Uriah to come back. Uriah, by the way, is also named as one of the 37 great men at the end of the book. And Uriah, I love the character of Uriah. He says, I'm not going to go and have sport with my wife when my fellow warriors are out at battle.
Yeah. And Uriah even, echoes some of those ideas that David had. The Ark of the Covenant is living in a tent. Why should I go to my house? Why should I feast and lay with my wife?
Yeah. Which, of course, David's plan was, well, if I can get Uriah to lay with his wife, then he'll believe it was his kid.
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work, and so he sends word to Joab to basically to strand Uriah and get him killed.
Yeah.
A really, really sad story. So it was. It's just sad.
Yeah.
Just sad.
And yeah, I mean, David pays for it, right?
Yep.
It's not that, he's just the king and is able to get away with these bad deeds, but he's the king under God, and God is a just God, right?
Yep.
So chapter 12 brings us Nathan, who already had told...
But before that, Bathsheba mourns her husband, and then when the mourning is over, David sends for her to his house, and she became his wife. She bore him a son. And then the last verse of chapter 11. But the thing that David had done was evil in the sight of the Lord.
Interesting. Mine says, the thing that David had done displeased the Lord.
Yeah.
Similar ideas.
Yeah.
So.
And then we get to chapter 12, where we are introduced to Nathan.
Yeah, we're not actually introduced to him here, because he's the same guy who told David, no way, can't build a house for the
That's right.
Ark of the
That's
Covenant.
right.
That's chapter 7. That same night, the word of the Lord came to Nathan, and he must actually be introduced before. The king said to Nathan the prophet, I guess, see now I dwell in the house of cedar, but the ark of the God dwells in a tent. So I think that's where Nathan is actually introduced. So he's already this prophet for God who is, blessing David and telling him no. Yeah. And David's listening. David wants to follow God's word. And, this even comes out in the story that Nathan tells.
Yep. Yeah, he tells a story that David gets outraged at. Mm-hmm. How can it be? A rich man takes a poor guy's sheep, and that's not the way it should be. And Nathan looks at him and says, you are the man.
Mm-hmm.
And David understood. He understood what had happened, and that he was guilty.
Mm-hmm.
But Nathan makes it pretty straightforward. You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with a sword, have taken his wife to be your wife, have killed him with a sword of the sons of Ammon. Now, therefore, the sword will never depart from your house. So David now paying for his sin.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen the VeggieTales version of this story?
No.
I really like it. I'll have to show it to you later.
Okay.
And maybe I'll put a link in the description or something. But I just think it's very funny because, VeggieTales is for little kids. And this is not a story for little kids. It is, depending on the way you want to read it, David rapes a woman, gets her pregnant, and then kills her husband.
Yep.
And it's not a nice story.
Nope.
And VeggieTales does a fun job of portraying it, where he's stealing rubber duckies from Uriah, and Nathan comes and says, "But you have so many rubber duckies." It's just a funny portrayal of this story that is evil.
Yeah. I do like what God says in verse 8. I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your care, and I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if that had been too little, I would have added to you many more things like these.
Yeah.
God was ready to open the floodgates of heaven and bless David, and then he decides he's going to take Bathsheba.
Yeah. Mine says, if this were too little, I would add to you as much more. Like, I would have doubled this for you.
Yeah.
If you wanted more, you just needed to tell me. I would have given you more. You didn't need to be stealing.
Yeah.
You didn't need to be, taking from another man, from a fellow warrior, one of the mighty men. Later it says there are 800,000 warriors in Israel, and Uriah is one of the 37 mentioned to be mighty.
Right. And so Bathsheba becomes his wife, delivers a child, and the child is sickly, and the Lord struck the child, and he was very sick. And then David spends this time period.
Yeah. It seems like 7 days.
Yes,
David
7 days.
He goes in and lays on the ground, not eating. Everyone, all of his advisors come to him, and they're, hey, wake up. Hey,
Yep.
you need to get up. You need to eat something. You can't waste away like this.
Yeah, they were afraid that he might harm himself.
Yeah, they were afraid. We can't tell him that the boy has died because, he's been this bad, with the boy alive.
Yeah. And instead, David gets up and eats food and
Goes in to worship the Lord.
Yeah. His reasoning be, while he was still here, there was a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's no chance. Why should I fast? I
Yeah.
can't bring him back.
And this is David's response is, what? God doesn't bring people back from the dead.
Right.
And that hasn't been a thing that's happened yet.
Yep. So then Bathsheba gets pregnant again and gives birth to Solomon, who we don't hear much about for the rest of 2 Samuel.
Right.
But we do have war coming again.
Yeah, but we know the Lord loved him.
Yeah.
And I just think that's interesting that it's like out of this evil thing. Now they're married and Uriah is dead. There's no longer this deception going on, and Bathsheba is able to bear one that God loves.
Yeah.
So much so that Nathan is changing his name to Jedediah, beloved of the Lord.
Yeah. So we have war again, and then another one of those events which is, you just shake your head and go, how can this be? Two of David's sons, Absalom and Amnon.
Mm-hmm.
They coexist, but Amnon has a daughter, Tamar, who is
Yeah, Tamar is beautiful.
It
is interesting.
Absalom has the daughter, Tamar.
Absalom and Amnon are brothers. They're both David's sons.
They're brothers by a different mother.
Yeah, they have different mothers. David, with Absalom's mother, also had a daughter, Tamar.
Yes.
And so Absalom and Tamar are siblings.
Yep.
And
Amnon is a half-sibling.
And
Amnon falls in love with Tamar.
Yeah.
And she doesn't reciprocate.
Yeah, Amnon is David's oldest son. That's what it said earlier. That this is the first son born to David.
Yeah.
And we've seen before that the first son has some expectation of being consecrated first, being given to the Lord. And there's some expectation that there's going to be more love given, and also some expectation that there's going to be less love given, through what we've seen, that the youngest son gets to be loved in some way.
So the story goes on, and Amnon pretends that he's sick and asks for Tamar to come and care for him. He eventually entices her to come into his bedroom and feed him, whereupon he takes advantage of her.
Yeah. Now, as far as David and Bathsheba, I think that's less clear-cut for if it's rape. This one is very clear-cut.
Yep.
This one, he grabs her, he pulls her to him, and he says, do this. And she says, no, I don't want to. Why would you defile me? This is a terrible thing.
Yep. It says he violated her.
Yeah. And she goes out, crying, of course.
And then he hates her.
Yeah.
He turns, he hated her with a very great hatred. The hatred for which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her.
Yeah.
And he sends her out.
Mm-hmm. And she says, no, this wrong in sending me away is greater than the other that you did to me. You already violated me. Do you have to send me away now?
The end result of that is that she goes out and she tells Absalom, and Absalom says, keep it quiet. And basically he says, I'm going to take care of this.
Yeah.
How long did it take for him to take care of it?
I think 3 years.
It was I think it was 2 years. 2 or 3 years. That's, but that creates another crisis.
Yeah.
Because now Absalom has killed one of David's sons. The word comes back to David that Absalom had killed all of his sons.
Yeah.
But they said, wait, that's not true. It was just the one.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I guess, Absalom flees for 3 years. And I like the last verse. The spirit of the king longed to go out to Absalom because he was comforted about Amnon since he was dead.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. It seems like it's saying, my reading of it, is that David, he longs to be with Absalom because Absalom was defending, the honor of, first of all, of God's law. We had mentioned it before, but, in the Mosaic law is this command, don't sleep with your father's daughter.
Right.
And, Absalom has defended that law and defended David's daughter, and it seems like David is wanting to go and comfort him.
Yep.
And he's comforted about Amnon being dead. It seems like he's glad, this guy who, is David's son, of course, but was doing evil things. Clearly he wasn't altogether, faithful.
Right. It was 2 years in chapter 13.
Yeah, verse 23 says,
it was
after
2
two
years.
full years, Absalom had sheep shearers.
So, interesting thing with the role of women in chapter 14. Joab convinces a woman to come to David and talk to him in this long story about two sons and basically the story which is designed to cause David to say, send for Absalom, bring him back.
Yeah.
And it works.
I think it's interesting. I would not be able to tell a story like that. I mean, Nathan does it, and now Joab does it.
Yeah.
This story that is able to, make David so invested in it that he's willing to say, this is terrible. I'm so angry. How could something bad happen like this? And, then for the storyteller to say, but you're doing this.
Yep.
I've never been told a story like that where somebody tells me a story that is like about my life situation, but I don't figure it out until after they tell me it's me. I don't know. It's just an interesting idea that David is so able to be invested in these stories.
Yeah. So then Absalom comes back, and now he lived for 2 full years in Jerusalem, but he didn't see the king's face.
No, sorry, I just saw a footnote. Chapter 13, verse 21, what does yours say? Because mine says, King David heard of all these things, that is, Amnon taking advantage of Tamar, and then having her live as a desolate woman. David heard of all these things, he was very angry. And then a footnote that the Dead Sea Scroll says he would not punish his son Amnon because he loved him, since he was his firstborn.
I don't have that footnote.
Okay. Interesting. I guess I don't know when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, or but it's fairly recent, and I don't know. Your translation is 50 years old, so
The Dead Sea Scrolls are an interesting thing, and it's cool to see where they're found.
Yeah.
You think, how could they not have found these scrolls? Well, because if you go to see where they found them, these caves are almost absolutely inaccessible.
Yeah.
You got to be a rock climber to get to them. And anyway, the Dead Sea Scrolls, you find them, and then you have to put them together, and you have to get the translation from them. So that is probably indicated somewhat in why you have a footnote from the ESV written 40 years after the New American Standard. So now what happens here is we get to chapter 15, and Absalom now,
Absalom did a good thing, and it got to his head.
Yeah.
He spends these 3 years having fled, and it seems like David actually would have taken him back, immediately, but he got in his head that David wouldn't. It seems like he's angry at David for something, and he comes back and he wants to become king now.
Yep. And he endears himself to the people, so that eventually, and this zips through a number of chapters, he gets himself proclaimed king, and David flees.
Yeah. It's interesting. Absalom is described as attractive. Tamar is described as attractive. David is marrying these beautiful people and having kids with them, and he's also beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And that's how David is described. Just that it's interesting to me that that these people are all described that way.
Yep.
Described with with favor in their eyes, as if who knows who wrote 2 Samuel? It wasn't Samuel, because Samuel died before
Right.
1 Samuel ended, but probably whoever wrote this wasn't seeing them. So it's just interesting that they're described that way.
Yeah.
And described with so much adoration of their looks.
So what happens is Absalom becomes, he gets himself called king in Hebron. He's gathered people, and David flees, and we have a number of years where David and Absalom are enemies.
Yeah.
And
David once again doesn't want to kill his son.
right.
David doesn't let people go up to kill him. David is a great warrior, and presumably is a great leader of people. People, it says, just rush to be around David all the time.
Yep.
David could probably just take up an army and kill Absalom and take back his land, but I think that it points to who God is, that David is a man after God's own heart, that God doesn't take over the earth again with his armies, but
and David doesn't fight battles he doesn't have to fight.
Yeah.
He didn't have to fight Saul because he was already anointed to be the next king. He didn't have to fight against Ishbosheth. He didn't have to fight against Absalom.
Yeah.
He can just let it take its course, and eventually, even David gets cursed as he's leaving. This is in chapter 16. This guy who was of the family of the house of Saul comes along. He throws stones at David, and he curses him, and says, "Get out, you man of bloodshed and worthless fellow." And the people say, "Why don't you silence him?" And he says, "Well, maybe what he's saying is true."
Yeah, they take him. I mean, it seems like the soldiers do take Shimei, and they try to stop him. And David says, "Just let him. Like, he's one man. What's he gonna do? Throw a rock at me? One man can't die to a rock to the head. That'd be crazy." But he does say, of course, we can't. There's no reason to stop him. Maybe what he's saying is true. Maybe I am an evil, worthless man. I've done some bad things. Besides, if it's true, then it's true, and stopping him isn't going to stop it from being true.
Right.
And if it's wrong, well,
Then it
stopping
doesn't
him
matter.
isn't going to do anything, and maybe the Lord is going to count it to good for me.
So David flees. Absalom enters Jerusalem, and they start having greater war between them. In chapter 17, verse 23, one of the leaders, the counselors, Ahithophel,
Yeah.
saw that his counsel was not followed. He saddled his donkey, arose and went to his home, to his city, and set his house in order, and strangled himself. Thus he died and was buried.
Yeah.
Ahithophel.
Ahithophel advises Absalom, you just take your army and go and kill David. And I think it's Joab, right? Oh, no, it's Hushai, David's friend.
Yep.
That tells him, like, oh, no, don't do that. David's a great warrior. He knows how to do things. If you go up against him, you might not even be able to find him.
Yeah.
And
this was, the Lord ordained these things to thwart the counsel, so that the Lord might bring calamity on Absalom. This is part of David saying, God's going to take care of it.
Yeah.
He's going to take care of the issues. I don't have to take care of it. Which ultimately happens in chapter 18.
Yeah, where David mustered the men. It all comes back to mustard.
So, chapter 18, verse 5, the king charged Moab and Abishai and Ittai, saying, "Deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom."
Mm-hmm.
This is David saying, "Okay, I know I'm going to return the king." The people heard the king charge all the commanders concerning Absalom. The people went out again into the field against Israel, and the battle took place. And ultimately, Absalom's going to die.
Yeah. And it's interesting, the way Absalom dies is not really that he doesn't get struck by a sword or a spear.
Right.
He
None of the mighty men of David
yeah.
have to kill Absalom.
Yeah. It's a testament to them also that they're willing to listen to David's command. David as is described, an angel of the Lord, in at least in my translation, saying he's a messenger of the Lord. Nobody strikes Absalom dead. He's just riding on his mule and isn't watching where he's going, and his head gets caught fast in a great oak.
Yeah.
And he's suspended between heaven and earth, and the mule keeps on going.
Yep. And a man saw it, and he comes to Joab and says, "Hey, I saw Absalom hanging." Joab says, "Why didn't you kill him?" And I love what the man says. Verse 12. "Even if I should receive 1,000 pieces of silver in my hand, I would not put my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing the king charged you, saying, 'Protect for me the young man Absalom.'"
Mm-hmm.
Here's somebody who says, David said, "Protect him. I'm not going to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
If I had dealt treacherously against his life, then you yourself would have stood aloof."
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Joab says, "I would have been glad to give you 10 pieces of silver and a belt." And the man says, "Even if I felt it in my hand, the weight of 1,000 pieces of silver.
Yeah.
Multiply it by 100, it's still not good enough."
Yep. So Absalom dies, and David is grief-stricken.
Yeah. Now his third son that we've seen
Yep.
is dying. One at 7 days old, one that Absalom killed, and one that ended up struck down by God, it seems like. And I like David's response. I don't know, I guess it's how I imagine any father feels when their child dies.
Yep.
He says, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son."
Yeah. That's the end of chapter 18.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 19, Joab says, "I don't understand why you're so upset.
Mm-hmm.
Absalom wasn't such a good guy." But
David is still covering his face and crying with a loud voice, "Oh, my son, Absalom! Oh, Absalom, my son, my son!" And Joab says, "You're covering me with shame now. You are showing that you would have saved the lives of your sons and daughters rather than all of your servants.
yeah.
You love those who hate you and hate those who love you."
But Joab was basically saying, "You're about to be re-crowned king.
Mm-hmm.
Put on a happy face."
Yeah.
Which David ultimately does. The people come before him, and Israel had fled, each to his tent, and the people quarreled, and David gets crowned king, gets restored as king.
Mm-hmm.
And go ahead.
Well, you started a sentence and then you stopped it.
Yeah, you're right.
I think it's interesting. Mephibosheth is seen again, Jonathan's crippled son, and at this point now, Mephibosheth's servant has already come and told David that Mephibosheth does not want any part of him, and David says to Ziba, his servant, "You can have everything that was going to go to Mephibosheth, everything from Saul's house." Yeah. And Mephibosheth now meets David, and David says, "Well, why didn't you come with me?" And Mephibosheth says, "Well, my servant deceived me. He said, 'You're a cripple. I'll go with the king in your stead.'" And then he slandered me to you. And, now it says, but my lord the king is like the angel of God. Do therefore what seems good to you. I just like that Mephibosheth is so willing to do whatever David says.
Yeah.
And
David, again, showing his grace and mercy, because also in this chapter, you remember that guy that was throwing stones at him and cursing him. The people said, you should deal with him now. And the king says, you shall not die. He said, for do I not know that I am king over Israel today? Should any man be put to death in Israel today? Absalom has died. I've been restored as king. And David responds with grace.
Yeah. And Mephibosheth, David tells Mephibosheth, oh, well, I'll just split it half and half, you and your servant. And Mephibosheth says, well, he can just have it all. I don't actually care. I'm just glad that you're here. I'm just glad that you're safe. And David tries to bless Barzillai, the Gileadite, who had come down and tried to escort him over the Jordan. This 80-year-old man who had cared for the king. And David wants to bless him. And the guy says, look, I really appreciate the blessing. That's a really nice thing you want to do. But I'm old. I'm just going to slow you down. You're just going to have to care for me in my old age. And I would kind of like to be with my family. I want to be buried with my mother and my father. Can you just let that happen? And you take my annoying son. He doesn't say his son is annoying. And he just says, this guy's young and is going to actually enjoy being in your presence. He's going to enjoy, hearing the young men and women sing. He's going to enjoy watching them dance. He's going to enjoy your food. I can't even taste things anymore.
Yeah. And there's the conflict between Israel and Judah continues on at the end of chapter 19. The words of the men of Judah were harsher than the words of the men of Israel.
Mine says we're fiercer.
Yeah.
They have an argument, and Israel says, why are you stealing our house? And Judah says, well, the king is from Judah. We should be in the king's house. We should be around. Why are you angry?
Yeah. So we get to chapter 20, and there's another revolt. Sheba revolts, and that revolt is eventually put down. And I marked verse, this is chapter 20, I marked verse 16. A wise woman called from the city, Hear, hear, please tell Joab, come here that I may speak with you. I marked that. But here's another woman.
Yeah.
We often think, well, the women don't have any part in Israel, but it is there all the time.
Yeah.
So she speaks to Joab and impacts the history of Israel.
Yeah, and I like it that she's described as a wise woman too.
Yeah. So then, chapter 21.
Yeah.
The Gibeonites have revenge. There's a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year. And David remembers what the Gibeonites had done for him, and he says, what can I now do for you? And they say, we're not interested in gold or silver. We're not concerned about that. David says, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And
they ask for 7 of his sons, 7 of Saul's sons, right? Yeah. And David says, okay, yeah, you can have those, but he spares Mephibosheth.
Yeah.
Because of the oath that was between them, between David and Jonathan.
Ultimately, then we get into chapter 20. We're in chapter 21, and Mark 15 and 16. Then Ishbi-Benob, who was among the descendants of the giant, the weight of whose spear was 300 shekels of bronze in weight, was girded with a new sword, and he intended to kill David. This is going to be a descendant of Goliath.
Right. Or, maybe not a descendant of Goliath, but a relative of Goliath, right?
Okay, yeah. I'll tell it not in Gath.
Yeah. And it's interesting, a few of these different giants are showing up here in this section. One that has 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number. I like the idea that having more toes makes you more powerful. But I think it's just showing that he's a big guy.
Yeah.
And maybe it's saying he has more toes because he needs them to stay upright more. And he has more fingers because, his hands are so big, the 5 fingers don't do. Having the 6th one helps him grab his sword, which is going to be, equal in size to him.
Yeah. And these 4 big men were born to the giant in Gath. They fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants.
Mm-hmm.
And David then is going to respond with another song.
Yeah.
He spoke the words of this song to the Lord in the day the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies. And this song is one of those songs that songwriters today
Mm-hmm.
take the words from. The Lord is my rock and my fortress, my deliverer, my rock, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge. I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. I am saved from my enemies. Again, in some way, the writings that David has
Mm-hmm.
are more easily translated into musical English.
Yeah. At least in English.
Yeah.
So it is cool that these words are, we hear of David as a great musician and a great lyricist, especially in 1 Samuel. We hear of it as he comes to soothe Saul.
Yeah.
And it says he does soothe Saul. And it makes sense that people are describing him as, a great speaker, a great writer, a great lyrist, a guy who plays the lyre really well. And even when Samuel comes to see David, David's just sitting out in the field playing his instrument, right? So it's nice that we have these recorded things that David, as now the 3rd king of Israel, or the 4th king of Israel, or the 5th king of Israel, however you want to count it, the 7th king of Israel, if he's like Donald Trump was, he was president and then somebody else, and then
Right.
Donald Trump is now the next number again. However you want to count David as the kingship of Israel, it's through his house that this house is going to reign forever. And it's nice that now he got some people to write down some songs.
Yeah.
And we'll read more of those in the Psalms. And it's nice that now a couple are written down in 2 Samuel. And it's cool to see just how beautiful they are. With the merciful, you show yourself merciful. With the blameless man, you show yourself blameless. With the purified, you deal purely. With the crooked, you make yourself seem torturous. You save a humble people, but your eyes are on the haughty to bring them down.
Yeah.
For you are my lamp, O Lord, and my God lightens my darkness. For by you I can run against a troop, and by my God I can leap over a wall. This God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord proves true. He is a shield for all those who take refuge in him. That they're just beautiful words that they just beautifully translated. And I guess in any translation I've ever read, they seem beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's just a testament to God's glory that that words written about him can remain so beautiful.
Yeah.
Thousands of years later.
So after David sings his song, and they name the mighty men of Israel,
Mm-hmm.
and there's an interesting little sidelight here. David was in a stronghold while the garrison of the Philistines was then in Bethlehem. And David had a craving and said, "Oh, that someone would give me water to drink from the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate."
Mm.
And so 3 guys sneak over there, and they draw water and bring it back to him. And David says, "Oh, wait, I can't drink this. I can't. Far be it from me that I should to do this? Shall I drink the blood of men who went in jeopardy for their lives? Therefore he wouldn't drink it. These things the three mighty men did. Three people that went in there to please David, and David said, that was too much.
Yeah.
It was too much of a sacrifice.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about drink offerings, and this seems like that. He poured it out to the Lord.
Yeah.
It's this offering that David says, the most pleasing water I can think of is from this well, and I'm giving it to the Lord.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't even, these people wouldn't even be strong enough to go do this if not for the Lord.
And then we mentioned already in the listing of the 37 mighty men, Uriah is the last name on that list. And we come into chapter 24, and for some reason, David takes a census, and it's displeasing to God.
Yeah, it's interesting. The anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel again, and he incited David against them, go number Israel and Judah. And so the king says, let's go number all the people, go through all the tribes and number them all. And they do it. And then once they have the numbers, David says, I have sinned greatly in what I have done.
Yeah.
It's interesting because now it's a command from God, and David is feeling that he's sinned greatly.
Yeah. And, we don't really understand why, but...
But it's not an isolated event where God commands something and, his oracle does it, or, whoever he's speaking to does the thing and then feels that they've sinned greatly.
Yeah.
So it's a trend that follows on in these future prophets that we'll read of.
It's interesting that God gives him a choice of 3 different punishments for having taken a census. And we aren't told which one David chose, except that we are told what happens, which is this pestilence sent over 3 days, and 70,000 men died.
Yeah.
Kind of reduced the census.
Yeah, down from 800,000. It's interesting. It says there were 800,000 valiant men, and the men of Judah were 500,000.
Yeah.
So it seems like Judah is a large portion, 5/8 of the people. Is that?
I took that to be 2 separate. I took that to be 1.2 million, 1.3 million.
Yeah.
But either way, they're...
Yeah. Either way, the people of Judah far outnumbered their 11 tribal brothers.
Right. So they have pestilence, and David, the people call out, and the angel stops. The angel of the pestilence stops, and David wants to build an altar where the pestilence stopped, and it was at the threshing floor of Arana. And David goes to him and says, I want to build an altar here. And Arana says, go ahead. Everything you need is here. You can have it. And David says, no, far be it from me. I will not buy. I will surely buy from you it for you from you for a price. For I will not offer burnt offerings to my Lord, which cost me nothing.
Yeah.
That, I think, is a powerful statement. I will not offer something to the Lord which costs me nothing.
Yeah. And it seems like David's now learned. This is the story that Nathan tells David, that a rich king with many sheep in his flock, comes and has a visitor and takes the visitor's sheep.
Yeah.
And now David has, it seems like, at least learned a little bit that he does desire God. He just sometimes is bad at it.
Yeah.
And so now he's willing to say, like, I'm not going to be the guy who offers to the Lord something that I didn't even buy.
Right.
I'm rich. I have everything in the world. God has given me everything.
In this, to me, I'm reminded of Jesus talking about the widow's mite. The widow who gave all that she had.
Yeah.
And the rich guy just gives a lot more, but it costs him less.
Yeah. And I would wonder, I don't know, Arana is offering up his own offerings, right? And is David stealing that away from him by buying it so that it's David's offering? I think there's not reason to believe that. The story hinges around David and not around Arana. And I think that just by him offering it to David for free is pleasing to the Lord. That's what we see, is that what God desires is a heart that is, a contrite heart.
Yeah.
A heart that is full of giving, full of love, full of righteousness, and that if the actual actions don't play through, if you don't actually get to give away your ox and sheep for your burnt offering, God's still going to be looking upon you favorably.
The last sentence of this book is a promise, a hope. The Lord was moved by prayer for the land.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord was moved by prayer. It's worth it to pray, even when it seems like nothing's happening.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord is moved by our prayers.
Yeah.
So that's all the notes I have for 2 Samuel.
Yeah. And it's interesting. 2 Samuel 23 starts with, "These are the last words of David. The oracle of David, the son of Jesse, the oracle of man who is raised on high, the anointed of the God of Jacob, the sweet psalmist of Israel." And then he tells a poem again. And then he keeps talking.
Well, mine talks in the last words. It says the last song.
Okay.
That's but
I just find it interesting. David has not even died yet. So I guess since he hasn't died yet, we don't know if he will. But that's how First Kings starts. So.
Yeah. Okay. We get into 1 Kings next time.
Yeah.
God
Thanks
bless.
for joining us.